Quiero un bebé, dijo la mujer Apache mientras llamaba a la puerta del vaquero solitario. The sun was low in the sky, spilling golden light over the dusty ranch. The wind moved softly through the dry grass, carrying with it the smell of the earth and horses. The cowboy, a man known by few in the nearby town, worked steadily along the fence line. His hands were calloused, his face lined from years under the sun, and his eyes carried a quiet kind of sadness. He had lived alone for a long time, ever since the loss of his family, and the ranch was both his sanctuary and his burden. Every fence post, every horse, every corner of the land was part of his life, and he kept it exactly as it was, untouched by strangers or distractions. He was fixing a broken rail when a sound caught his attention. It was faint at first, almost a whisper carried by the wind. Then he heard it again, a soft but firm knock at the front door of his small ranch house. His brow furrowed. Visitors were rare, and he could not remember the last time anyone had come to see him. Usually they only came for a quick trade, a message from the town, or perhaps to ask about land, but never someone who knocked with such purpose. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and set the hammer down, walking slowly to the door. His boots made a soft crunch on the gravel, and he felt a mixture of curiosity and caution. When he reached the door and looked through the small window, he froze. Standing there was a young woman, her posture straight, her eyes clear and full of determination. She had dark hair that fell softly around her shoulders and a skin tone that spoke of long days under the sun, a mark of her Apache heritage. She looked at him directly, without hesitation, as if she had known him all her life. "I want a baby," she said simply. The words came in Spanish, soft but steady, yet their meaning hit him like a sudden gust of wind. The cowboy stepped back, startled. He had heard many things in his life, seen many struggles and hardships, but these words were different. They were not a request for help with work, nor a story of loss, nor a call for charity. They were personal, urgent, and intimate, spoken by someone who seemed fearless yet vulnerable at the same time. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. The woman waited patiently, sensing his confusion. Her hands were relaxed by her sides, but there was a quiet strength in her presence. She was not asking in anger, not pleading in desperation. She was simply stating a truth that mattered deeply to her. The cowboy studied her face, trying to read the story behind her eyes. There was something raw and honest in them, a mixture of hope, courage, and need. He opened the door slowly. I don't understand," he said finally. His voice was rough, not unkind, but cautious. She stepped forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I am not here to hurt you," she said gently. "I need someone who can help me, someone I can trust. I have nowhere else to go." Her Spanish words were simple, yet the emotion in her voice carried the weight of her life's struggles. The cowboy leaned against the doorframe, his mind racing. He had always lived alone. People came and went, but no one had ever sought him in this way. And yet, something about her made him pause. Maybe it was her bravery, maybe it was the sincerity in her eyes, or maybe it was the quiet loneliness he recognized in her, something that mirrored his own life. "Come in," he said after a long pause. His voice was low, almost hesitant, but it was an invitation. She nodded slightly, a small smile touching her lips, and stepped onto the wooden porch. She carried herself with dignity, yet there was an underlying vulnerability that made him want to protect her, even though he barely knew her. Inside the house, the air smelled of wood and dust and years of solitude. The cowboy gestured to a worn chair by the fireplace. "Sit," he said. She obeyed, her movements careful, as if she were weighing every step. He closed the door behind her and leaned against it, unsure what to say next. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. The cowboy finally asked, Why me?" The woman looked around the small room, her gaze thoughtful. "'Cause I know you are honest. Because I believe you are good." Her voice wavered just slightly, revealing the depth of her trust and hope. "I have seen people take advantage of others, people turn away from those in need. I cannot afford that. I needed someone who could understand, someone who would not abandon me." He studied her face. There was no deceit there, no trick, just a woman standing at his door, asking for something he had never imagined being asked to give. He felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. He did not know if he could help her. He did not know if he was ready to face something so personal, so life-changing. And yet, he could not ignore her. Something about her presence unsettled him in a way he could not define. A feeling that maybe for the first time in years his life might shift in a direction he had never imagined. The woman leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on her knees. "I am asking for trust," she said. "I am asking for your heart, in a way. I cannot do this alone." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that pressed against the quiet room, filling it with urgency and hope. The cowboy rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the floor. He had lived through loss and pain, and he knew the dangers of opening himself to others. Yet, he also knew the emptiness of living without connection. He had spent years keeping the world at a distance, but here was someone who refused to step away, someone who demanded a response from him, not just in action, but in feeling. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know if I can do what you ask. I don't know if I am the right person." His voice was rough, but there was a hint of softness in it, a crack in the armor he had built around himself. And she smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with understanding. "I don't expect everything at once," she said. "I only ask that you consider it, that you let me stay here tonight, and we see what tomorrow brings." The cowboy nodded slowly. There was something about her patience, about the quiet strength she carried, that made him willing to try. "You can stay," he said. "Tonight." He did not promise more, not yet, but it was a start. As the evening settled, they shared a simple meal, bread, cheese, and stew. The woman spoke little, but her presence filled the room. The cowboy found himself listening, really listening, in a way he had not done in years. She told stories of her childhood, of the desert land she had grown up in, of her family and traditions. There was a dignity in her words, a connection to the land and to her people that resonated with him. He, in turn, shared fragments of his life, pieces he had long kept buried. He spoke of the ranch, of the loss that had made him retreat from the world, of the silence that had become his companion. She listened without judgment, without interruption, her eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. Hours passed, and the room grew quiet. Outside, the stars began to shine, scattered across the dark sky. The cowboy felt something he had not felt in years, a spark of hope, a sense that perhaps life could still surprise him, that connection could still exist beyond his solitary existence. The woman finally rose, moving to a small window and looking out at the ranch. "This land, it is strong," she said softly. "It can hold life. It can hold hope. And so can you?" The cowboy did not reply immediately. He remained in his chair, thinking. He realized that her words were not just about the land or the ranch. They were about him, about his ability to accept life again, to trust, to care, and perhaps even to love. The night deepened, and the wind whispered through the grass outside. The woman prepared a small bed in the corner using a blanket she had carried with her. She thanked him quietly for letting her stay. The cowboy watched her, a strange warmth in his chest that he had long forgotten. As he lay awake that night, listening to the sounds of the ranch, he realized that everything was about to change. The knock at the door, the simple words she had spoken, had set in motion a path he could not ignore. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, or whether he could meet the trust she had placed in him. But for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something new, possibility, hope, and the chance to open his heart again. And so, under the quiet stars, in a house filled with dust and memories, two strangers began a journey together. One came seeking a future, and the other was unknowingly ready to step into it. The night held them both, fragile and uncertain, yet united by the silent understanding that life, however unpredictable, could still be full of surprises. Morning came slowly over the ranch. The first light spilled over the hills, painting the desert in soft shades of gold and pink. The cowboy was already awake, moving quietly through the house to avoid disturbing the woman sleeping in the corner. He had not expected to feel protective over a stranger, but something about her presence had changed the way he saw the world. She woke as the sun touched the floorboards, stretching slowly and blinking at the light. There was a calm confidence in her movements, though her eyes carried traces of worry and exhaustion. She looked around the small house, taking in the worn furniture, the tools stacked neatly in corners, and the sense of order that spoke of the cowboy's years of solitude. The cowboy standing by the stove watched her quietly. "Morning," he said simply. His voice sounded softer than usual, as if the night had shifted something in him. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice carried a note of warmth, yet there was hesitation too. She had traveled a long way, and yet she had placed herself in a situation she could not control. The house was simple, the food was plain, but it was safe, and for now, that was enough. He handed her a cup of coffee, the smell rich and strong, and they sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the faint sounds of the ranch waking up. Horses stirred in their pens, a dog barked in the distance, and the wind whispered through the grass. The quiet was different from the silence of the night. It was alive, full of potential and small promises. After a moment, the woman spoke. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said. "I know this must be strange for you. I did not come to disrupt your life." Her words were gentle, but the honesty behind them made the cowboy feel a connection he had not felt in years. He nodded slowly. "It's not normal, no," he said. "I live alone. People don't usually come here looking for help in this way." His voice trailed off, leaving space for the weight of their situation to settle between them. She tilted her head, studying him carefully. "I know," she said. "That is why I came to you. Because you are not like the others. You have a life that is real, honest, and grounded. I need someone who can be strong in ways that matter. Someone who can care when it is not easy." The cowboy felt a strange emotion rise in his chest. He had lived through loss, had faced the hard edges of life, but never had anyone spoken to him with such clarity, such trust. Her words were not a demand, not a plea for charity. They were a request, a hope, a bridge he could choose to cross, or not. They moved through the morning with small routines. The cowboy fed the horses, brushing their coats and checking the fences, while she swept the floor and helped with the simple chores of the house. Neither spoke much, but their shared work created an unspoken bond. Each movement, each glance, added a layer of understanding between them. At one point, the woman paused, watching the cowboy as he mended a broken fence post. "You are very skilled," she said. "You know your land better than anyone could teach you." He smiled faintly, the first real smile in a long time. "It's been my life," he said simply. "Every fence, every corner, every horse, I've learned from it all. And yet you are alone, you carry it all yourself." There was no judgment in her tone, only recognition. Sometimes life gives too much to one person. It is okay to let someone in. He paused, leaning on his hands against the fence. Her words lingered, touching something deep inside him. He had built walls around himself, keeping the world out, keeping others at a distance. But she was different. She did not demand entry. She merely asked to be trusted, to be seen, and to share what she needed. After breakfast, she suggested they take a walk around the property. The ranch stretched for miles, a combination of desert, hills, and small streams that nourished patches of green. As they walked, she spoke of her childhood among her people, of the traditions she had learned, and the ways she had been taught to survive and respect the land. The cowboy listened quietly, fascinated by her stories. He had known the desert intimately, but he had not known it through the eyes of someone connected so deeply to the earth and its rhythms. She spoke of her ancestors, of the stories passed down through generations, and of the strength that had been nurtured within her. "I have always believed that life is fragile," she said, looking out over a stream. "But it is also strong. It survives storms, droughts, and pain. We survive, too, if we have courage and trust." Her words struck him. He realized that survival was not just about physical endurance. It was about trust, about connections, about allowing oneself to hope even after loss. He had been surviving, but he had not been truly living. As they walked, they came across a patch of wildflowers that had survived the harsh desert. She bent down, touching the petals gently. "Even here, life finds a way," she said softly. "It is the same with people. Even when life is hard, we can grow, we can thrive." The cowboy watched her, feeling a warmth in his chest that he had not known in years. There was something about her presence that made the ranch feel alive in a different way. The land had always been his companion, but now he felt a connection to another human being, someone who could understand and share the weight of life. As the day moved on, they returned to the house. The woman helped him with small chores inside, fixing things that had been neglected, cleaning, organizing. It was the first time in a long while that the cowboy had allowed someone into his space in such a way. He noticed how naturally she moved, how carefully she handled each task, and he felt a sense of gratitude. When the afternoon sun was high, they sat on the porch, watching the horses graze. The cowboy broke the silence. "I don't know if I am ready for what you asked yesterday," he said honestly. "It is not something I have thought about. I have lived alone for so long, I don't know if I can suddenly change my life." She nodded, understanding.
"I do not expect you to have all the answers," she said. "I only ask that you consider it."
"That you think about it, and see if you can find a place for trust and hope in your life." Her words were not demanding. They were gentle, but they carried weight. The cowboy felt a pull in his heart, a recognition that life could be more than survival. It could be connection, partnership, and even joy. He did not have to know everything now. He only had to be willing to see what could be. As evening approached, she prepared a simple meal, and they ate together in quiet companionship. The sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows over the ranch. The cowboy found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing fragments of his life, his losses, and his fears. She listened without judgment, without interruption, her presence steady and reassuring. After dinner, they stepped outside to watch the stars appear one by one in the clear desert sky. The silence was comfortable, a companionable quiet that allowed reflection. She spoke softly. "You have been through much, but you are not finished. Life still has chapters for you, even if you do not see them yet." The cowboy felt the truth in her words. He had been frozen in the past, held back by grief and solitude. But now, with her presence, he felt the possibility of a future he had not dared to imagine. He did not know where this path would lead, but he knew he wanted to see it, step by step, with trust and care. Night fell, and they returned inside. She prepared another small corner for herself, respecting the boundaries of his home while making it feel safe. He watched her quietly, a new sense of responsibility stirring within him. She had come seeking help, trust, and connection, and he realized he could not turn away. Not now, not after seeing her courage and sincerity. As he lay awake that night, listening to the soft sounds of the desert, he thought about the day, about her words, and about the quiet strength she carried. For the first time in years, he felt the stirring of hope and possibility. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that he could face it, not alone, but with someone willing to share the journey. And so, the first day passed, not with grand decisions or dramatic changes, but with small steps of understanding, trust, and shared life. Two strangers, brought together by circumstance and courage, had begun a journey that neither could predict, yet both were willing to take. The night was quiet but full of promise. The cowboy, once alone and closed off, felt a shift inside him, a recognition that life, even in its fragility, could still hold hope, and that connection, once lost, could be found again. The woman slept peacefully, trusting him to guard this space, this day, and the new beginning that had quietly started between them. And in that quiet house on the edge of the desert, life began to change, gently, with patience, trust, and the courage to take the first steps towards something neither had expected, but both could now imagine. The next morning, the ranch was bathed in soft light, and the air was crisp with the scent of earth and grass. The cowboy had woken early, as was his habit, but this time there was a quiet anticipation in him. The woman was already outside, gathering firewood near the barn. Her movements were careful, but there was a rhythm and grace in the way she worked, as though she had been shaped by the land for her entire life. The cowboy stepped outside, boots crunching on the gravel, and called her name. She looked up, smiling briefly, and nodded. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying a calm strength that made the ranch feel warmer, more alive. He studied her for a moment. There was something about the way she moved, her focus on even the smallest task, that reminded him of how life could be disciplined, patient, and purposeful. He had lived alone so long that he had forgotten the rhythm of shared work, of companionship, and the quiet trust that comes from seeing someone rely on you and trusting you in return. "Do you need help?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "I can manage," she said. "But if you want to, you can stay close. We can work together." And so they did. Side by side they moved through the morning, the horses watching them with curious eyes. The cowboy showed her how to mend the fence, where the weak spots were, and how to keep the animals calm. She listened carefully, asking questions, learning quickly, and in turn she shared her own knowledge, how to identify signs of illness in the animals, where to find clean water, and how to read the tracks in the desert for any potential danger. Their collaboration felt natural, almost like a dance. Each step, each word, each glance built trust. The cowboy began to notice how much he had missed this, having someone at his side, someone who cared, someone who made the land feel like more than just his responsibility, but also a place of life and connection. But as the sun climbed higher, the quiet, peace of the ranch was interrupted. A group of townspeople appeared at the edge of the property. Their faces were filled with curiosity and judgment. Rumors had already spread in the town about the woman and the cowboy. People whispered about why a stranger had come to him and what it might mean for the solitary man who had lived apart from everyone else for years. The cowboy felt a tight knot in his chest. He had always avoided the town, had always preferred the quiet of his ranch to the opinions and gossip of others. Now he had to face them, and it was clear they were not here to ask about business or trade. They were here to question his choices, to challenge the trust he had begun to build with the woman. The woman stood calmly beside him, her expression steady. She did not flinch or step back. Instead, she faced the group with dignity, her presence commanding in its quiet way. "We are not here to harm anyone," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the dry air. "We are simply living our lives." Some of the townspeople scoffed, while others looked uncertain. One man, older and with a harsh expression, stepped forward. "You think you can just bring her here and change the way things are? You live alone for a reason. People like her, people like that, they bring trouble." The cowboy tightened his jaw but remained silent. He had learned long ago that words alone could not change opinions, and sometimes it was better to show through actions rather than argue. The woman did not respond further, only stood tall, showing that she would not be intimidated. After the visitors left, the cowboy exhaled slowly. "They won't understand," he said quietly. "Not yet." She turned to him, her gaze softening. "That is okay," she said. "We do not need their approval. We have each other. That is what matters." Her words struck him deeply. She was right. Trust and care were built not on the opinions of others, but on actions, patience, and honesty. He realized that he had been living for other people's judgments for too long, and perhaps it was time to live for something else, something stronger, something real. The afternoon brought new challenges. A sudden summer storm rolled in from the hills, dark clouds gathering quickly, and the wind picking up. The temperature dropped, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Horses neighed nervously, and the cowboy rushed to secure the animals. The woman moved beside him, helping to tie down gates, bring the animals to shelter, and cover the feed. They worked together in silence, the rain beating down on their backs, soaking their clothes, but neither complained. There was a sense of urgency, of shared purpose, that strengthened the bond between them. The cowboy realized how much he relied on her presence, her calm in the chaos, her knowledge and courage. She was not just a visitor. She was becoming an essential part of life on the ranch. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving the land wet and refreshed, the air fragrant with the scent of rain on earth. The cowboy and the woman stood outside, watching the clouds drift away. "You handled that well," he said finally. She smiled faintly. "We handled it together," she replied. He nodded, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. It was the warmth of partnership, trust, and shared experience. For the first time in years, he felt that he was not alone in facing life's difficulties. As night fell, they returned to the house. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting soft shadows across the walls. They shared a quiet meal, speaking in low tones about the day, the storm, and the way the land responded to water. The cowboy began to see her not just as a stranger, but as someone with deep understanding, strength, and patience. She had shown resilience in the face of challenges, courage in the face of judgment, and kindness in every small act. Later, as they sat outside under the stars, she spoke softly. "You have carried this land and your life alone for a long time," she said. "But it is okay to let someone share the load. It does not make you weak, it makes you human." The cowboy looked up at the sky, the stars reflected in his thoughtful eyes. He had known solitude for so long that the idea of sharing it had seemed impossible. And yet, listening to her, he felt a shift within himself. Perhaps life was not meant to be carried alone, and perhaps trust, connection, and hope could grow, even in places that seemed harsh and unforgiving. Over the following days, their routine settled into a rhythm. They worked side by side, shared meals, and spent quiet moments observing the land and the animals. The woman's presence brought life and energy to the ranch, and the cowboy found himself laughing more, speaking more, and feeling emotions he had buried long ago. But challenges continued to arise. Word reached then that her family faced difficulties in their village, needing support and guidance. She spoke of them with concern. Torn between duty and the life she was beginning to build on the ranch, the cowboy listened, offering advice and assistance where he could, understanding that life was never simple and that building trust and connection sometimes meant facing the problems of others. One evening, a small accident occurred. A young horse stumbled and injured its leg. The cowboy acted quickly, assessing the situation and working with the woman to tend to the animal. They spent hours together, cleaning the wound, calming the frightened horse, and ensuring it was safe for the night. The experience, though stressful, drew them even closer. Each saw in the other dedication, patience, and an ability to face difficulties without losing hope. Through all these trials, the cowboy began to realize that life was offering him something he had thought was lost forever: companionship, trust, and the possibility of a future with someone who shared his values and his respect for the land. The woman, in turn, saw in him a quiet strength, a steadfastness, and a capacity for care that went beyond words. By the end of Part 3, the bonds between them had grown strong, tested by both the judgments of others and the challenges of nature. They had learned to rely on each other, to communicate without needing constant words, and to find strength in shared moments of both struggle and calm. Life on the ranch was no longer just a solitary existence. It was becoming a shared journey, one built on trust, courage, and the willingness to face challenges together. The night came, quiet and calm, the stars reflecting in the wet grass and still streams. The cowboy and the woman sat together by the fire, the warmth of the flames echoing, the warmth growing between them. Both knew that the path ahead would not always be easy. The world outside the ranch could be harsh, judgmental, and unforgiving. But they had discovered something stronger than fear or doubt, a bond built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. And as they looked up at the vast sky filled with countless stars, both understood that the challenges they had faced were only part of a larger journey. There was hope, there was connection, and there was the quiet promise that life could still bring them what they both longed for: understanding, partnership, and the courage to face tomorrow together. Spring came to the ranch with gentle warmth and a soft breeze. The days were longer now, the sun rising early and painting the fields with golden light. Flowers began to bloom near the barn and along the edges of the property. Even the desert grass seemed greener after the winter rains. The cowboy had never noticed these small miracles before, but now, with the woman by his side, each sight felt brighter, more alive. She was outside early, tending to a patch of wildflowers near the fence. Her hands moved with care, planting seeds and arranging the small plants so they would have space to grow. The cowboy watched from the porch, his cup of coffee warming his hands. There was a quiet pride in him, not just for the work of the land, but for the life they were beginning to build together. "You're up early," he said, his voice calm and soft. "I like the morning," she replied, smiling. "It feels peaceful. It is a time when everything is possible." He nodded. Ah, she had taught him that life, even in its simplest moments, could carry meaning and hope. Her presence had changed the ranch, had changed the way he viewed the land, the animals, and himself. It was not just the work they did together. It was the trust they had built, the shared routines, and the understanding that they were no longer alone. As they worked together, laughter came more easily now. The cowboy found himself joking, teasing lightly, and she responded with warmth and good humor. The loneliness that had filled his life for so many years had begun to fade. Every shared task, every small conversation, every quiet moment under the sky was a brick in the foundation of something new and strong. One afternoon, she brought up a conversation that had been on her mind for a long time. "I have been thinking about the future," she said softly. Her voice carried both hope and caution. "We have built trust and shared these days, but we need to think about what comes next. About the family we have talked about." The cowboy paused, leaning on the fence, his eyes thoughtful. "I've been thinking too," he admitted. "I am ready to try, to step into something I did not think I could. But I want to do it with care, with thought, and with trust between us." Her eyes brightened. "That is all I ask," she said. "We do not need to rush, but we can start planning, preparing, and building our life together." Over the next days, they focused on preparing the ranch for the future. They repaired the house, fixed broken tools, and organized the barn. The cowboy taught her about the subtleties of managing the land, where to plant, how to store water, and how to read the weather. She, in turn, showed him small traditions from her culture, how to care for the earth, how to respect its rhythms, and how to nurture life, even in challenging conditions. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, the cowboy stood at the porch, watching her tend to a small garden near the house. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "It feels more alive." She looked up, brushing soil from her hands, and smiled. "It was always alive," she said. "But sometimes it takes two people to see it fully, to care for it together." He nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Life was not just about surviving. It was about noticing beauty, cultivating trust, and sharing responsibilities. He realized that the land was no longer just his. It was theirs, and that made all the difference. As spring turned warmer, they began preparing for the arrival of a child. She spoke gently about her hopes and fears, and he listened, offering comfort and strength. There were moments of uncertainty, of doubts and worries, but they faced them together, sharing courage and patience. The cowboy, who had once believed he was meant to live alone, now found himself imagining a future filled with laughter, small footsteps, and a family to care for. The ranch, too, seemed to respond to this new energy. The horses were healthier, the fields greener, and the streams clearer. Every animal, every plant, every corner of the land carried a sense of renewal. It was as if life itself was celebrating the change that had come over the ranch and its people. One evening, as the sun set in vibrant colors, they walked together along a trail that led to a small hill overlooking the property. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and gold, and the air was calm. The cowboy took her hand gently, feeling the warmth and trust between them. "We have come a long way," he said softly. "From the day you first came here asking for trust, to now it feels like a different life." She squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "It is different," she said. "And it is ours. We have built it together, with patience and care. We have faced challenges, and we have grown stronger." They sat on the hill for a while, watching the sky change, the land stretch out before them, and the quiet life they had nurtured. The cowboy realized that this moment, this peace, was worth everything. The struggles, the judgments of others, the storms, they had all led to this point, to a life that was fuller, richer and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. In the following weeks, they continued preparing the house and ranch for the future child. The woman arranged a small room, placing a cradle by the window so the baby could see the sun and stars. She decorated it with handmade items, simple yet beautiful, each with love and care. The cowboy helped bringing tools, fixing shelves, and making sure the room was safe and warm. Their days were filled with work, laughter, and shared moments of quiet reflection. They spoke of hopes for the future, of the values they wanted to pass on, and of the lessons of life they had learned together. Each day brought them closer, deepening their trust, strengthening their bond, and preparing them for the new life that would soon join their family. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch together. The air was cool and the sky was clear, filled with stars. The cowboy looked at her and said, "I never thought life could be like this again. I never thought I could feel hope or joy or love." She rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "It is because we faced life together, because we trusted each other. Love grows from trust and care, from patience and understanding." They stayed there for a long time, watching the stars, feeling the quiet rhythm of the ranch, and imagining the future. There was no rush, no urgency, only the calm certainty that they were building a life together, a life filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. As the weeks passed, the ranch became a place of preparation, joy, and anticipation. The cowboy and the woman continued their work, their routines, and their shared moments. Every task, from feeding the animals to planting the garden, carried a sense of purpose and connection. They were not just caring for the land, they were nurturing their life, their bond, and the future family they hoped to welcome. Finally, the day arrived when they felt ready. The house was prepared, the cradle placed, the ranch in order. The woman looked at the cowboy, her eyes filled with hope and determination. "We are ready," she said softly. He nodded, feeling the weight and joy of responsibility, the thrill and fear of change, and the deep certainty that they could face anything together. "Yes," he said, "we are ready." In the quiet of the evening, with the sun setting over the hills, and the wind carrying the scent of flowers and earth, they embraced the moment fully. The ranch, once a place of solitude and work, had become a home filled with trust, care, and love. Life had offered them both a chance to grow, to connect, and to build a family. And as they looked out over the land, watching the horses graze and the stars begin to shine, both understood that their journey was just beginning. They had faced challenges, built trust, and discovered the strength of partnership. Now, with hope and courage, they would step forward together, ready to welcome the new life that would complete their family and continue the story they had begun on this quiet ranch at the edge of the desert. The night was calm, filled with the gentle sounds of the desert, the warmth of the fire in the hearth, and the quiet heartbeat of two people who had found each other. In that calm, they both knew that life was not just about survival. It was about connection, love, and the courage to embrace the future, no matter how uncertain it might seem. And in the stillness of the night, with the stars shining brightly above, the ranch stood as a symbol of hope, trust, and new beginnings. Two lives, once solitary and uncertain, had intertwined to create something strong, enduring, and beautiful. Together they were ready to face whatever life would bring, with hearts open, hands joined, and the promise of tomorrow waiting just beyond the hills.